Okay.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reality Rights. I am author Ellie Alexander. This is the podcast where we talk about all things bookish, writerish, and whatever else is on our mind. And I am here with the tech guy.
Hello. How's it going today?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. We're talking conferences, conventions, and festivals today.
I feel like that needs an oh my at the end of it.
Conferences, conventions, and festivals, oh my.
Oh my. Uh-huh.
Totally. But first, we got to talk about you've got a new book out.
I have a new book out and I have a copy in my hot little hands.
Ooh.
For all the darlings that are listening, I'll do like AMSR, like, ooh, there you can hear the pages turning of The Whisking Hour, book 22 in the Bakeshop Mysteries, which is out at bookstores on shelves everywhere as we speak.
Book 22. And
book 22.
You would love to be using a certain song right now to celebrate the book 22, but we can't do it.
I could sing it, but you really don't want me to do that.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. But book 22 is out. You're already writing right now, book 24. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Oof. Bakeshop is growing.
Bakeshop is baking.
Only 2 dozen bake shops by the time that one comes out.
That's bonkers.
This time next year, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's amazing. What else you got going on in your writing life that listeners might want to know about?
I mean, I think the darlings are going to be intrigued in hearing about today's episode because we're going to break down the difference between festivals, conferences, conventions, and I am in that zone right now with Left Coast Crime that's happening in San Francisco. And we kind of like spring tends to kick off festival and conference season, especially in the mystery genre. So there's just like a lot going on in the world right now. So I'm excited to.
That's awesome. Yeah. And one real quick mention, as always, for the patrons out there, head over to Patreon after this episode for the after party. And for those of you who don't know about Ellie's Patreon, if you head to patreon.com, you can sign up, and the after party is where more fun happens. Let's just put it that way. We talk a little bit more candidly than we can out on the public airwaves, and just have a good time. Give people a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain, and listen to reader and writer feedback, and just growing a really great community over there. So that is the after party over on Patreon. But now let's get into it. Let's talk about conferences, conventions, and festivals. Oh my.
Oh my.
Where do you want to start?
I know. What should we start with? I mean, I think we should start with kind of the difference in terms of a conference and a convention versus a festival. So I just alluded to Left Coast Crime, which is one of the big mystery conferences. Other things like that would be Malice Domestic, BoucherCon, there's Thriller Fest, there's Crime Fest, Sleuth Fest, there's a New England Crime Bake, I think is what it's called in New England. So these are all readers absolutely attend, but these are also very writer, industry, publishing focused. When I'm talking about a conference, this would be likely hundreds of authors who readers would get to meet, or hundreds of authors that as a writer, you're going to get to engage and meet and talk with and do events and panels and that kind of thing, as well as industry professionals. So editors, agents, anyone in the field of publishing.
So go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say, you go ahead and finish the festival definition first, and then we'll go into.
Okay. So a festival is more reader focused, like the Ashland Mystery Festival. There are tons of festivals like this, especially all throughout Europe. I'm thinking of there are different like crime festivals, Agatha Christie centric ones. There are beautiful ones in Scotland. So these are more small, intimate. Maybe you have anywhere from a dozen to 25 authors, but a much smaller author number because they're designed to be much more engaging in terms of the access that readers get to authors. And when I say they're reader centric, it is about reader activities and events. So all of the events and panels are driven toward readers, less so on the craft of writing, publishing, that end of things.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So as a writer, as an author, do you prepare differently for those things?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For sure. Because for something, let's use Ashland Mystery Fest because it's the festival that I helped launch. So I know it intimately myself. The idea behind that is I want anyone who attends to feel like they are stepping into the pages of a cozy mystery, not just my cozy, but a cozy in general. So, it would be things like the first year we had authors pair up with groups of readers and they had to like sleuth out suspects through town and try to chase a tail. They did things like putting on disguises. We're talking about a mystery that you have to solve that's interactive all throughout town. All of the panels are focused on that. So the kind of panel content that I'm brainstorming right now with the authors for the 2026 Author Mystery or Ashland Mystery Fest are very different in tone and style than things that I would experience when I'm attending, say, a Left Coast Crime, where a lot of that is going to be on the art of writing, the process of writing, a lot of the same questions about, what does your daily writing process looks like versus trying to come up with things like author speed dating and how can I make sure that any reader who's coming feels like they are part of the festival. And there is a caveat here that some of these bigger conferences have smaller versions of that. So for like Left Coast Crime, for example, there are these author reader connections. And so authors can sign up to do something with readers. Ellen, Byron, and I are going to have a glass of wine and like a cozy treat with a few authors before the kickoff event. So there are things like that that happen. I don't want to, make it sound like if you are a reader and you just want to go to one of these big conventions as a reader, absolutely. It's a different vibe and focus.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of differences between them, although there's a lot of overlap too, and in certain subjects. But if someone's brand new to these things from both a writer and a reader perspective, which of the type a conference, convention, or festival would you suggest that would be like less intimidating or like a good place to start if they were interested in going to one of these things?
I mean, if we're talking less intimidating, definitely a festival, because as I mentioned, they're going to be smaller. There are going to be a plethora of opportunities for you to meet all of the authors in attendance, to make connections with other readers in attendance. As far as somebody who is working on their writing and thinking about their path to publication, you can garner a treasure trove of knowledge from some of the bigger conferences and conventions. For Ashland Mystery Fest, for example, we always make sure we have a couple panels that are focused on the craft of writing too, because I know there's crossover. And I also know as a reader, I always find it interesting, and as a writer, to hear other writers' process. So there's always an element of that. But if you are a new writer, and let's say you're thinking you've finished a book or you're almost finished with a book and you're trying to figure out, like, okay, what do I do next? Going to something like a BoucherCon, a Left Coast Crime, a Malice is going to be tremendously helpful because there will be so many panels and opportunities to connect with industry professionals.
Yeah, yeah, and so panels are one thing that when I mentioned that there are commonalities among these types of event, writerish, readerish, bookish events. That's one of the things. So let's talk a little bit about mystery specific versus general writing conferences, because there's kind of both, right? There and other genres have their own conferences too. But since you know a thing or two about mysteries, those are ones that you kind of focus on. But there are general ones too. And so, what are some of the big ones, and what are the differences?
Yeah, there are. So each genre has its own. There are all kinds of romance conferences, obviously sci-fi, fantasy. You can whittle it down, mystery as well. If you're an author or a new writer who is publishing a mystery, let's say, I think the best bang for your buck in terms of actual money as well as your time would be to go to one of those that I just named off, like BoucherCon, Left Coast Crime, Malice. At all of these, you are going to have an opportunity potentially to meet agents, to pitch agents, editors. You are going to have those industry people in attendance. Now, there are also a lot of regional writing conferences that I think are highly valuable. And I went to when I was first, on my path to publication. Pacific Northwest Writers Association. Willamette Writers is the first conference I went to where I did my first round of pitching, and that is not genre specific. So you're going to get everything, and you're going to sign up for agent pitches. Usually with conferences like that too, they'll do a pitch practice as one of the nights. So usually maybe the first night of the conference or even the day before it opens, where anyone gets to come in and just do their 2-minute elevator pitch and get feedback from other people in the room, which is highly valuable, just to have ears and eyes on what you're writing and working on and having people tweak that for you. And then you can sign up for one-on-one direct pitches with agents, or sometimes agents will do a table of pitches. And that was fascinating my first time around, because I'm pitching this cozy mystery, but the woman next to me is pitching historical fiction. Somebody else is pitching like sci-fi fantasy. So, you learn a lot. It was also really fascinating to hear what other projects people were working on too.
That's really interesting. So from a writer perspective, if you've got people next to you pitching other genres, like, did you get anything out of that? Did you pick up any hints or tips that you could translate over into the mystery world in terms of pitching?
Absolutely, because pitching is an art in and of itself. And so I think a good pitch comes through regardless of what the content is. If you're somebody who's pitching, I mean, of course you're going to be nervous, because it's like
Right.
auditioning for American Idol in the book world. You're sitting in front of an agent, and you're putting all your trust and faith into this one person who may or may not be a match for your project. As an aside, well, no, we'll circle back to making sure you do your homework. But I quickly learned how important it was to have a very refined, tight, short pitch, because in a situation like that, you maybe have 5 minutes total. So a minute or two to have a really quick, concise pitch, which also shows an agent or an editor that you have done your homework. You know where your book is supposed to land on shelves. You have a sense of the market. You're able to, in a quick amount of time, give them that like back cover pitch that makes them go, oh, okay, I want to read more. There were, certainly writers who weren't as polished or were still working on their pitches. And, they spent the whole 5 minutes trying to find their way and fumbling through. And that's a great learning opportunity. But that's why, when you're going and you have an opportunity like that, you really want to do your homework and be ready to pitch.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because it's you mentioned being, it's natural to be nervous. And I imagine that just being in front of a potential agent and doing your pitch one-on-one would make you nervous. But now you're sitting at a table with your peers, essentially, like other writers who have their own projects that they're pitching. And like literally all eyes in the room are on you when it's your turn to talk. So doing your homework probably includes giving that elevator pitch to a number of people prior to going to the conference, right?
I mean, I think I practiced it on you and Sky Guy 1,000 times. I had it
Yeah.
on note cards. I had my title. Like, I felt really good about it. And I'm not somebody who gets terrified speaking in public. I had a history of doing that. I in my previous career did a lot of public speaking for my job. And I remember giving the first one, and I'm not a sweater. Usually I just turn bright red, and I sweat through my shirt. Like, I felt pretty good about the pitch. And then I went out into the bathroom and I was like, okay. Oh, so it's totally terrifying. I'm not taking away the fact that it is an intimidating process. I do think, like, what I understand now about the industry is you are really, as a writer, you're trying to find an agent who is a match for your project. You want somebody who's going to be excited and championing. Why can I not say that word? Championing. Yes. I wanted to add an extra ing there. Your work, and hopefully a long-term partner. And so I think the beauty of pitching is it kind of forces you to get really narrow and tight, what you're going to need to do along every step of the way. And I think that's true even if you're going indie, because you want that nice, tight, concise back cover copy and that pitch to be on your website and on the book listing and all of those sorts of things. It's also just an incredible opportunity to get some feedback from an industry professional, and hopefully somebody is then going to be willing to maybe read the first 3 chapters or 50 pages of your work. The one thing is, these are sign up based events, right? So if you attend one of these conferences, then you're going to see a list of all the agents in attendance and you sign up for a slot. You want to do your due diligence and your homework. You don't want to be pitching a children's author if you're writing adult sci-fi, right? And those are the only opportunities you have to pitch a professional at these conferences. So the same rules that we've talked about in previous podcasts apply. That means if you're not signed up for a pitch session with an agent, you can't follow them to the bathroom or try to squeeze into a table at lunch and do your pitch there. Like, they're there, they're working as well, and they have designated times where they're hearing pitches from authors. So you also have to be thoughtful and respectful and professional.
Yeah, and not following those rules is a guaranteed way to get you blacklisted. You'll be word will spread fast among the agent and editor community that, this potential author is one to potentially stay away from. So
exactly.
Interesting. So then these are all paid, right? These. So this is I guess I would put it in perspective of like a gym membership, right? If you're paying for it, you should be using it. You should prepare for it. You don't just pay a gym membership and then just walk in without knowing anything about a gym and just standing there and looking at the equipment going, what do I do? Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to want, if you're paying for this, like, it's an investment in your career. Or a hobby. It doesn't need, like, writing can be a hobby. It's totally, but if you're paying for something, the takeaway here is you need to be prepared when you're going into it. Sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. So did you have any like breakthrough moments at any of these conferences early on in your career? Anything that stands out that, like, you prepared and you something just kind of clicked or happened that, like, really kind of changed things for you?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few things. For starters, I made other connections with writers who I am still friends with today. So that was great. I would take copious notes at any of the workshops. I went to a few conferences early on as I was starting to write. This was for my memoir before I segued into writing mysteries. And I learned how to pitch magazines and, like, build a portfolio of clips when I was trying to, have kind of a baseline to start with. Especially in nonfiction, you need that piece before you publish. And so I made a lot of connections that way. I was a student of anything that I could attend or any kind of bonus workshop in a narrow focus. I didn't go to stuff on writing sci-fi or, like, if we're talking about some of the bigger, more broad conferences. When I had a completed manuscript and I was ready to pitch, I did my research. There were 6 agents in attendance at Willamette Writers that year who were actively acquiring mysteries. And I had already started a list of my dream agents, but I hadn't sent any queries out because I wanted to test the waters first with these in-person pitches. And I got 6 yeses. And then I was off to the races. And then I was like, well, okay, it seems like my pitch is there. So now it might be time to query. And then that really snowballed. But I think the reason I was successful is because I had done so much legwork and practice going in. And so even though I was sweating through my shirt, I had done that pitch 1,000 times and I felt really confident, and the book was done and ready, and it had gone through beta readers and all of those things that happen with a first book.
And your elevator pitch was clean,
Tight,
tight,
yeah,
clean. Yeah,
uh-huh. Give them
yeah,
less, let them ask more questions. Like, so much
right.
better to have a shorter pitch than one that drowns on forever.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's from those are conferences from a writer perspective. What
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about what readers get out of like let's just use mystery conventions as an example. Like what makes a mystery convention fun or magical for readers?
The first time that I went to BoucherCon, I mean, first of all, like if you go to any of the big conferences, and BoucherCon is the biggest of them all in the mystery world, it's huge. Like they're every big name author you can imagine. So you can like niche down within subgenres, which is what Ashland Mystery Fest is. It's only cozy authors, right? We don't invite anyone other than cozy. Ashland is quintessentially cozy, so that's our focus. BoucherCon is everything. True crime, noir, cozy, like anything that falls under the mystery umbrella.
Mm.
I've got my little tote bag. I'm starstruck. I'm looking around everywhere. I'm in line for coffee. And who's in line in front of me? Sue Grafton. Sue Grafton,
Whoa.
who I had read and adored her Kinsey Milhone alphabet series my entire adult life, is standing in front of me at coffee and turns around and is just chatting. So that getting to hear authors who you have admired, there are always signings as part of these bigger events. So, I think if you are someone who loves the mystery genre, it is absolutely worth attending something like this. And I think there are so many great opportunities just to meet other readers and to be in a space where you have a shared love of something. So you're going to meet a lot of like-minded people probably.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so from a reader perspective, because you were a reader long before you were a writer, and
Yeah.
as you just said, you had authors that you were definitely a fan of and everything. What did anything surprise you as a reader? Did you see any interactions kind of like behind the scenes between mystery authors that surprised you?
Yeah, I think early on it was interesting to hear how much collaboration there was on the panels with authors, because I had come into writing with that pervasive myth that writers were really competitive.
Mm,
And I quickly learned that wasn't true from attending some of these conferences. But there were just so many opportunities to really get a peek behind the curtain in terms of people's writing process and new things that were coming out. There are always really interesting workshops. Like the police came one of the first years at one of the big conferences that I went to and did a whole panel about, like, no, you're never going to do that. Last year, there was a training at Author Nation that I went to in Vegas, which is a big indie author conference. A stunt woman who taught you like physically how to write scenes where somebody's fighting or getting out of a fight. So there's so much rich content there. A crime scene dog came with their handler one year to talk about how an animal is going to handle a crime scene. So you can get really specific in terms of the content you can learn there.
yeah, yeah. That actually, while you were talking, it just made me think of the first Ashland Mystery Festival, the panel that Chief O'Meara sat in
Yes.
on, and for the darlings out there,
Oh gosh.
nicest guy in the world, but so serious. Like if you looked at him, he looks kind of angry, when he's just
Yeah.
standing there. I mean, he
Right.
looks like a police chief, right? That you would expect, like, okay, he's in charge of everything. Ashland's a tiny town. he came from a larger city into Ashland and everything, but seeing him sit on a panel with like 3 or 4 other cozy mystery authors was hilarious because
so funny.
everything that happens in cozy mysteries, he was like, no,
no,
not that. No.
Yes.
It was amazing. So great. And then he got some digs in on the fire department, which was super funny too. So you get a lot of fun interactions with authors and community members too. Sometimes law enforcement.
Sometimes law enforcement.
Yeah.
There is another kind of bookish convention that also happens, and these would be the Independent Booksellers Association conferences and library conferences. So for these, I don't know if you can. I should know this actually, but I don't know if you can just purchase a ticket to them or not. Maybe you can. I'll have to look into that. I don't know off the cuff, but from a writer perspective. So if we're talking about reader festivals, those intimate, the Ashland Mystery Fest, tiny festivals like that, authors get invited to those by the organizers because it's a very small, finite number of authors in attendance. If we're talking about the big conferences, Willamette Writers, Pacific Northwest Writers Association, Malice, Left Coast Crime, BoucherCon, those sort of things, authors sign up and pay to attend, just like writers do. So there's a ticket path for writers and there's a ticket path for readers. The Library Association or bookseller conferences, authors get invited by their publisher. So one year I went to the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Association conference and my publishing house sent me. And so at these, there are giant, huge signing tables, just like you would have at any of the other conventions and conferences. But all of the books are free because the publisher sends the author and sends the books. And it's like a big convention hall. So independent booksellers are coming by. They're picking up copies of your book to read themselves to see if they want to buy extra to bring into the store and to see if you might be an author they want to invite into the store. And then the same thing happens with library conferences. Publishing houses send authors to those, or sometimes the library associations pay an author to come keynote and then do a signing after because they have budgets for bringing in authors from all over the country, or, maybe again, a specific genre or something they're focusing on at the library that year.
Yeah. And for me, as just kind of, looking from the outside, it was really interesting going to the first one of these with you because I'd been to several other types of conferences and festivals with you, you as an author. And this is like completely different.
Totally different.
It was just interesting listening to the conversations because you're not talking to readers, you're talking to booksellers, and you're essentially pitching. You're pitching yourself all over again, essentially, and booksellers are definitely readers. It's just,
right, of course. No, we're not talking to readers. No, but yes, it's and so really for any darlings out there who are writers and you're thinking about like, okay, now that my book is published, what are the options for me? There really are kind of 3 ways that you're showing up, and they are very different. To circle back to what you asked in the beginning, the way you're going to show up at a festival that's really focused on readers is going to be to engage with readers and learn about them and make sure that they're having fun. At a conference, you're going to be with other panelists and be talking industry and craft. And maybe that's an opportunity where you get to meet up with your agent and editor. I met my agent and editor in real life for the first time when I went out to Malice because they were there too. So we'd been emailing for many years. We finally got to meet in person. And then at something like an indie booksellers conference, a regional conference like that, yes, you're pitching like, okay, I'm somebody who would love to come do an event in store, or here are my ideas for an event in store, or here's the kind of keynote I might give. Yeah. So it is, you're kind of showing up in 3 very different ways.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked a lot here on Reality Rights and you just in social media and your email newsletter and stuff about the many facets of being an author. And so it's not just one, like so that's kind of the key point is you're going to be attending these things in different ways and showing up in different ways. So you just need to, again, prepare and be ready. And most importantly, have fun. Because
totally. Yeah. They're all fun.
yeah, definitely. No, that's so great. Well, anything else to add before we wrap it up here on conventions, conferences, and festivals? Oh my.
Oh my. I feel like we could have a part 2 on this because there are so many more like maybe gritty details we could get into about them, but I think hopefully this has given the darlings an overview of what it's like from a writer's perspective to attend, to put on any of these events. And maybe hopefully it's inspired somebody to sign up for one.
That's right. Well, okay. So speaking of conferences, conventions, and festivals, oh my, we've got the fourth annual Ashland Mystery Fest coming up in October.
Yep.
What other conferences, conventions, and festivals, oh my, are you, Ellie Alexander, going to be at this year?
Well, I'll be at Left Coast Crime in San Francisco. And then I am keynoting the Pacific Northwest Library Association's conference in April. I will likely be attending something overseas this summer that I can't talk about yet. I will be attending the California Booksellers Association conference in September and then Ashland Mystery Fest. So, yeah, it's going to be a busy year of conferences, conventions. Oh my, oh my.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, that wraps up this episode of Reality Rights. We're now going to head over to the after party on Patreon, where we're going to talk about some of the fun interactions that have taken place at conferences, conventions, and festivals. Oh my, over the years.
Oh my. All right. Well,
because there have been many, and at least one of them involves a cape.
All right. Till next time.
Until next time.